Once again, there's a lot of interest that's developed in the Austrian move. So this would be the Austrian fourth turn. So let's have a quick look at it before we move on. We've got the two second line regiments that were down here, Austrian regiments, have moved back into the town of Mollwitz, because the Prussians, like this Klackstein regiment here, has got the town right in front of them, which was ungarrisoned. So, well, now it's manned. We'll see what happens there. Then the rest of the Austrian line has stayed in place. The problem they have is if they move at all, perhaps to get in the way of the Prussians being able to move on Mollwitz, they will, of course, lose their stationary status. And because they have a morale factor of 4, if they're not stationary when they're facing the Prussians, they could be in deep trouble. So although them just sort of standing there seems like an odd thing to do, that's the best the Austrian commander could come up with for the time being. Then over here, the regiment Rune here has, which is a second line infantry, has stayed in place and gone stationary. Bit of a command problem there because, of course, the other units of that division are over here, but presumably that won't be too much trouble now because they're in the town, so they really don't need to be commanded to move around much. Then we've seen some cavalry maneuvering going on, and we've got both of these cavalry units belonging to Römer have charged in on the Brandenburg regiment here, so that gives them a good chance of being able to do some serious damage to this unit. Now over here we had a cavalry unit here and we had a cavalry unit here, and this one was facing this one in the flank, and I struggled with all kinds of possibilities about being able to charge them in the flank and possibly routing them in this direction and so forth, and causing all kinds of problems going down the Prussian line. But at the end of the day, it was decided that it would be better to move that cavalry actually down in this direction, because these are second line units, and the Prussian second line division at the moment has taken no casualties at all, so it would take a heck of a lot of pounding on the second line to be able to exhaust it. Also, there was the issue of if it's being attacked from the front and if it's being attacked from the flank at the same time. As I understand the rules, the men are supposed to withdraw. If they're routed, they would go diagonally in this direction, so they wouldn't actually just roll up the line that way. Anyway, cut long story short, they were sent down this way, because the idea is if they can, as they have done now, this unit went to here, and the unit that was all the way back there was just about able to get down to here and pounce on the Prussian cavalry while it is disordered, so they should almost certainly destroy it and at the very least exhaust the division. And that will then mean that, and they were also joined by their third unit from their division, and which belongs to, let's see, von Berlichingen, and who's followed them down here. So then, if they can polish these off, that would mean that the Austrians then have no less than three cavalry units running riot in the Prussian rear. So they should be able to cause a great deal of difficulty for the Prussian commander. Anyway, that's where we are at the end of the Austrian move. No morale tests have been taken, so we'll do that. We'll do combat, and we'll be back. And here we are at the end of the Austrian 5 p.m. turn, which is the fourth turn of the engagement. And as usual, we've had some interesting results. And as usual, things are not going too well for the Prussians. First thing we had was our morale tests, and everybody passed their morale except for the Brandenburg regiment, which was here. They failed theirs, and in the subsequent melee, They were destroyed by the Austrian cavalry. That was 2 strength points, and it has caused the Prussian first line infantry division to become exhausted. And there we see von Mollwitz, the commander, exhausted. In other news over here, we had the combat with the 2 Prussian cavalry units that were here, and which were disordered, of course. They didn't fare well, not surprisingly, against the oncoming Austrian cavalry. They were destroyed, so that division has been destroyed outright. And now these 2 units have turned to face the Prussian rear, which beckons them. Let's see, that's what has happened. Now, what this means, of course, is that the Prussian first line infantry units, which are sort of scattered about a bit here and there and so forth, they can move toward the enemy, but they cannot charge into contact with the enemy. And if they're hoping to get into Mollwitz, this presents something of a problem. It means that the only way that Mollwitz could be taken by them would be if they were able to destroy the occupying units purely by shooting, and then just walk into the town, walk into an empty town. On the other hand, the Prussian second line infantry, which is completely fresh, it doesn't have a scratch on it, could march smartly up to Mollwitz and assault it and attempt to occupy it. Although, of course, keeping in mind the time is definitely running out here. The Prussians moving after the Austrians on each turn, they have still got 3 more turns to execute their cunning plans. So I suppose there's a possibility there. The Prussians in their next turn, they could assault stationary. They could go straight forward and assault the stationary Austrians here to try to get through to the town. But we remember how exceptionally bloody that was when the Prussian first line went into the stationary Austrian infantry. But of course, what the Prussian, the big problem that the Prussians have got is that there are basically cavalry running around all over the place. So now we have, I suppose we could, to use a slightly more modern term, the Austrians now they don't have cavalry superiority, they have cavalry supremacy. They've got 5 units that can be used in melee, and the Prussians have none. So it looks like it's extremely unlikely that the Prussians are going to be able to win this battle. But we now move on to the 5 p.m. turn for the Prussians. This is the end of the Prussian movement in the 5 p.m. turn. And we see that the Prussians have, after some consideration about whether or not to withdraw from the battlefield, they've decided to charge ahead, basically. So they've decided that they have some sort of a chance of still being able to take Mollwitz if fortune smiles on them. So there was a unit here, the Saxe-Eisenach Fusiliers from the second line were able to go straight through all the way to Mollwitz. And I made a correction on Mollwitz from the previous turn. When the infantry entered it, they would have been disordered and then could have become ordered once again. There was enough time for that to happen for this regiment, but not for that regiment. So that regiment is disordered. then the Prussians had a problem because two of the regiments, Klackstein here and von Schwerin down here, were out of command because the divisional commander was here, von Marwitz was here, and he was too far away. So those two units, basically having mulled over a few different options, have remained in place. The rest of the forces that were in the line here, the two units of the second line regiments, have charged ahead. We'll see what they do this time against the Austrian line. And then also the unit of grenadiers, which handily for the Prussians are shock troops. They reformed from disorder and were able to go straight back into charge at the Austrian line. The hope, of course, is that they're going to make some progress here and then be able to press on to Mollwitz. Now, the problem is, of course, is that they've got all this Austrian cavalry right behind them. A dent may be made in that by these units here, which have grouped themselves in this fashion. Artillery did a facing change, but is still stationary, and then these two units moved into place here. The idea is that they're going to blast this unit with fire, and the hope is that if they can score 2 hits on that unit, it will then push that division into exhaustion. So then the menacing Austrian cavalry behind the Prussian line, main battle line, will still be 3 brigades of cavalry, but at least it won't be 5 brigades of cavalry. The Prussians have repositioned their commanders as well, so they have a good chance that in the next turn that most of their units will indeed be in command. So here we are at the end of the movement, before any morale checks or any combat has taken place, and we will see what happens. Here we are at the end of the Prussian 5 p.m. turn, and once again have been interesting developments. If we take a look over here, we can see that Mollwitz itself is occupied by the regiment Saxe-Eisenach. They have thrown out the Austrian defenders in a bit of a surprise result. So we, as you will recall, we had the Prussians basically move forward to attack the Austrian line here, and also sent the 1 regiment to attack Mollwitz. The key point being there that in Mollwitz there were 2 regiments, but one of them was disordered, having only just moved into the town. The other one had had time to restore order. But let's see, to do things by the numbers then, if we start off over here, these units attacked this brigade of Austrian cavalry. They all opened fire upon the Austrian cavalry, and it was indeed stationary close range fire from the field artillery battalion here, but all they managed to do was to cause the cavalry to trade 1 hit against a saving throw, which it made, and was able to retreat back to this position here. Then we had the Grenadiers went in here and eliminated the unit, the Austrian regiment that was in front of them. Here, let's see, here we had, this was a surprise result because 1 unit failed its morale test. That was this unit here, which became disordered, and it was facing Prussians with a morale of 6. And surprisingly, they won the melee, and the Prussians were forced to retreat in disorder. Then we had, let's see, this Prussian unit here won the melee, moved forward to occupy the line, and forced this unit here back in disorder. And back here we can see the Austrians, which retreated from Mollwitz itself. The other regiment that was in there was destroyed. These men retreated from Mollwitz, and using a what seems to me to be a house rule that has been developed, they did not retreat off the battlefield. They retreated to the battlefield edge and then continued moving away from the enemy. So they've ended up there. Okay, so what we see is that the Austrians have lost Mollwitz. So now the Prussians have taken Mollwitz, which is what they need to do in order to win the battle. Just one moment. And I had to think about that because it seems to me that, in a nutshell, the Prussians have won the battle. They could win the battle from taking the town of Mollwitz or by defeating the Austrian army. They've taken the town of Mollwitz. There's nothing in the scenario that says that they have to hang on to it until the 7 p.m. turn. So they've taken Mollwitz, so they've won the battle. Okay, we can now, on a sort of a broader stroke, we can imagine, for example, well, what might happen if we carried on playing out the battle? We have got, let's see, it's an interesting situation because the Prussians have 4 divisions and 3 of them are exhausted or collapsed. So they only have 1 division, that is to say the second line infantry, which is not exhausted or collapsed. So it would sound like they were in pretty bad shape. But as we can see, although the Austrians have got, they've still got 5 viable brigades of cavalry, the cavalry here and the cavalry here. Infantry-wise, things are looking a bit slim for the Austrians because you've got these 2 units here, which are right up front, one of which is disordered at the present moment. And then back here, they are routed, they're disordered, and they would be out of command in the next turn. They would be in command in the next turn, so they could recover from disorder. But, and only the Austrian second line units, let me just 1 second here. Yes, that's right. Only the second line units on infantry are not exhausted. So that would mean only they could assault the enemy to try to dislodge them perhaps from the town of Mollwitz. But the Prussians, in terms of having just boots on the ground, as it were, they've got quite a lot of boots on the ground still, at least in terms of the infantry department, and of course these chaps over here as well. So it seems to me that if the Prussians wanted to, they could certainly hang on to the town of Mollwitz, even though they've taken very heavy losses. They've lost all their cavalry and they've lost an appreciable number of infantry. But they would still hang on to Mollwitz if they saw fit to so do. So there we are at the end of the battle, and I'll have a pause here just to think about if I'm going to include any other information. 1 second. And I think it might be useful to, while it's all fresh in my mind, to include some final footnotes on what took place in the battle. I think one of the key things is that it was a big surprise that that single Prussian regiment, which was, of course, was in good order, when it attacked the town, and then inside the town we had 2 Austrian regiments, one of which was disordered. It was a surprise to me that they had a viable chance of being able to defeat the enemy, but defeat them they did. I am sure that after this is done, I'll be going through the bath and looking at the probabilities and so forth with the dice rolls. But that's what happened there. Then in other news, well, obviously the Austrian cavalry gave a very good account of itself, good quality, potent stuff. And it certainly did plenty of damage as it swept its way around the Prussian right flank and down to here and all that sort of thing. The Prussian, in other broad strokes, of course, the Prussian first line hammered itself up against the stationary Austrian line and took very heavy casualties in the process. But then when the second attack was launched, which is one of the reasons I like Volley and Bayonet so much, because you can have attacks, and if that attack failed, you can attack again, do large strokes, and that one has had more success, it seems to me. And apart from that, let's see. I think that pretty well. Yeah, I think that pretty well wraps things up. So that was then the Battle of Mollwitz, which was the First Silesian War, April 10th, 1741, and we have a historical result. Then we have a victory for that. We have an Austrian cavalry outflanking maneuver that has done very well, but at the end of the day, we've had a Prussian victory brought on by the stout fellows that make up its infantry. And I say, here's to it.